Emily had always cherished the quiet of her home in the evenings, a rare moment where the hum of life seemed to slow down, allowing her to breathe deeply and feel a sense of calm she rarely found during the busy day. And tonight was no different. The soft golden sunlight poured through the half-open curtains, casting warm stripes across the polished wooden floor and dancing on the furniture, making her feel a fleeting sense of serenity as she moved from the living room to her bedroom. The familiar creak of the floor under her feet soothing in its predictability, yet as she closed the door behind her and began to change into a light, comfortable dress to relax for the evening, a sudden, unexpected knock froze her mid-motion. The sound sharp and intrusive against the otherwise gentle silence, and she instinctively called out, "Who is it?" in a voice that was calm but tinged with caution, hoping for a simple explanation, yet the only response was silence, an absence that made her pulse quicken and her mind race with possibilities of who could be at the door at this hour. And before she could even consider whether to open the door herself or leave it closed, the handle moved slightly, the door creaking in a way that made her heart lurch as if warning her of what was coming, and then Nathan, her stepson, appeared, stepping inside with a look of immediate shock plastered across his face, his eyes wide, mouth slightly open, caught in the act of an accident he hadn't intended, and for a moment, the room felt impossibly small, the air heavy with unspoken tension, a strange mixture of embarrassment, surprise, and something undefinable that hung between them, and Emily, cheeks flushing, instinctively covered herself with her hands while a confused laugh escaped her throat, the sound fragile but revealing the awkwardness of the situation, and Nathan's face mirrored her feelings, a crimson hue creeping up his neck as he stammered out apologies that came out rushed and tripping over themselves, words that tried desperately to make sense of a moment that neither had expected and yet both felt the weight of, and in that frozen second, time seemed to stretch, elongating the silence, the shock, the awareness of each other's presence in a way that neither had experienced before, and though the door was technically open, it suddenly felt like a barrier between worlds, a thin line dividing what was acceptable from what felt dangerously intimate, and Nathan finally turned, retreating quickly yet awkwardly, muttering a hurried "I'm sorry" as he exited, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts, the room now seeming emptier, larger, and yet full of echoes of the brief encounter, the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall, and she sank onto the edge of her bed, heart racing, mind spinning, wondering why the incident had felt so intense, so charged with emotion she could not yet name, a cocktail of nervous excitement, confusion, and the strange, fluttering sensation that maybe, somehow, this moment had changed something between them forever, and as she wrapped herself in a soft blanket, trying to regain composure and shake the lingering heat of embarrassment from her skin, she couldn't ignore the sudden awareness that Nathan looked at her differently now, the accidental intrusion leaving behind a mark, a subtle shift in the way he might see her, the way she might see him, a delicate thread of connection that had been woven in the quiet chaos of a single unexpected moment, and she found herself thinking of the simplest, most ordinary details, the curve of his eyebrows as he froze, the way his eyes avoided hers even as they betrayed a mix of shock and curiosity, the hurried, almost frantic motion of his hands as he tried to excuse himself, and the subtle tension in his posture that spoke louder than words ever could, telling her that the moment had affected him as deeply as it had affected her, and the thought sent a strange, unfamiliar warmth through her chest, a mingling of concern, curiosity, and something that bordered on longing, feelings she quickly tried to suppress as inappropriate, but couldn't, because the incident had stirred something dormant inside her, a recognition of desire, connection, and the fragility of the boundaries that defined their relationship, and though she scolded herself silently for thinking such thoughts, her mind kept replaying the scene over and over, a mental film in which every glance, every accidental brush of his hand on the doorframe, every hesitant step he took forward and back, seemed amplified, magnified, significant in ways that were frightening and intoxicating at the same time, and she realized with a shiver that the quiet house had become a backdrop to something much larger than herself, a story that had begun with a simple knock and an unplanned entrance, a moment that had broken the mundane rhythm of her evening and replaced it with a tension that was as thrilling as it was uncomfortable, and as she finally rose, smoothing her dress and taking a deep breath, she knew the rest of the evening would be spent in reflection, in the careful untangling of emotions that had been stirred by a single, fleeting encounter, and she understood instinctively that life in the house would feel different now. The familiar walls carrying the memory of that brief, unexpected moment, a whisper of emotion that promised more complexity, more awareness, and perhaps more challenges in navigating the delicate lines of family, respect, and the subtle currents of attraction that had unexpectedly made themselves known. And as the sunlight outside faded into the soft glow of evening, Emily felt the weight of anticipation, the quiet thrill of what might come, and the undeniable truth that nothing would feel quite ordinary again. For a single unexpected entrance had opened a door in both their hearts, a door neither had fully understood, a door that might never close. After that unexpected evening, Emily found herself replaying the moment in her mind over and over, unable to shake the memory of Nathan's wide eyes, the way his lips had parted in surprise, the tension that had hung in the air like electricity, and though she had tried to move on, the reality was that nothing felt the same anymore. The house, which had once been familiar and comforting, now seemed alive with small reminders of that encounter, a brush of hands when passing a plate, a lingering look across the living room, moments so subtle that they could have been coincidences, yet they carried a weight neither of them could ignore. And Emily noticed that Nathan had become quieter, more thoughtful, as if he were carrying the memory of that evening with him wherever he went, and it was in the smallest gestures. How he lingered a moment too long by the doorway, how he adjusted his expression when she entered the room, how his laughter, once easy and careless, now carried a note of hesitation, that she realized he was changed too, and the realization both thrilled and frightened her. She felt a curious blend of protectiveness and longing, a recognition of the young man before her, growing up faster than she could keep pace, and yet somehow feeling close in ways that blurred boundaries, making her heart ache with emotions she had never anticipated feeling, emotions that were tender, intimate, and charged with an unspoken connection that neither dared name. And she would find herself lingering at the kitchen counter, pretending to busy herself with dishes, only to notice him moving across the room, the way his eyes flickered towards her, a subtle awareness that spoke volumes, and she would catch herself imagining what it would be like if their relationship could exist outside the lines society had drawn. If moments like these could be acknowledged, yet she knew such thoughts were dangerous, a temptation she had to resist, and still, they came unbidden, as persistent as the beating of her own heart, and Nathan himself seemed caught in a similar struggle, torn between the respect he felt for her, the affection that had always been there, and this new, confusing depth of feeling that he could neither ignore nor fully understand. And Emily watched him one evening, from the doorway of the study, as he concentrated on a painting he had been working on, his hand moving deliberately, thoughtfully, the sunlight catching the angles of his face in a way that made her stomach flutter, and she realized with a mixture of awe and fear that the simple act of noticing him, of being aware of him in this quiet, ordinary way, had become an emotional event in itself. And the more she tried to suppress her feelings, the stronger they became, growing like a quiet storm inside her, a current of longing, of curiosity, of something tender and unspoken, and Nathan, too, was feeling it. She could see it in the way his gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, the small smile that tugged at his lips when their eyes met, the subtle shifts in his posture whenever she entered the room, all small signals, easy to dismiss, yet impossible to ignore once they were noticed. And Emily found herself torn between admiration and self-reproach, aware that this line they were dancing around was fragile, that one misstep could shatter the careful balance of their home, yet also aware that the heart rarely listens to reason when it senses connection, when it recognizes a bond that feels ancient, vital, and undeniable. And she remembered the quiet evenings of her past, spent dreaming of a love that was deep and consuming, and realized with a pang that what she was experiencing now, the mixture of care, attraction, and restrained desire, was awakening something in her she had almost forgotten, a reminder that she was alive, capable of feeling deeply, even in the most unlikely circumstances. And Nathan, for his part, was walking the same tightrope, aware of the electricity that pulsed between them, the moments that lingered longer than they should, the words left unsaid that carried meaning beyond explanation, and they both understood, without speaking, that the dynamic of their home had shifted, that every shared glance, every accidental touch, every quiet word carried a weight it had never held before, and yet they continued, day by day, navigating this delicate tension with careful attention. Emily finding solace in small routines that reminded her of normalcy while simultaneously drawing her attention to him in ways that made her pulse quicken, and Nathan, though often reserved, found subtle ways to connect, leaving small notes, offering quiet gestures, seeking approval or acknowledgement, and each interaction, though innocent on the surface, held an undercurrent of something more, a recognition of the emotional closeness that had developed almost unnoticed. And Emily would spend nights lying awake, recalling each fleeting moment, the tilt of his head when he looked at her, the light in his eyes that seemed to see her in a way no one else did, the careful way he spoke, as if measuring his words to avoid revealing too much, and she would wonder whether he, too, was lying awake, thinking of her, feeling the same ache of unspoken longing, the same thrill and fear of connection, and this thought alone was enough to make her heart race, to make her question the simple choices she had made every day in her role as stepmother, her position in his life, the delicate balance of authority, care, and affection that had suddenly become complicated by the emotional currents now swirling between them, and as days turned into nights, and nights back into days, the tension grew, a slow-burning fire, warm and dangerous, demanding attention even as they tried to ignore it, and Emily found herself imagining scenarios that were impossible, conversations that would never happen, moments of tenderness that had to remain only in thought, and Nathan, perhaps unknowingly, was doing the same, the closeness they shared, the accidental intimacy, the shared silences, all building into something neither could articulate. Something neither dared act on, yet both felt pressing, undeniable, and the house itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next moment that would tip the scales, the ordinary routines of cooking, cleaning, and shared meals now punctuated with awareness, with a subtle recognition that their emotions had changed the rhythm of daily life, and Emily realized that each smile, each glance, each carefully measured word was a part of a silent conversation, a conversation that carried more weight than spoken language, that created connection and tension in equal measure, and as she watched Nathan from across the room one evening, his head bent over a book, fingers tracing the lines with a care that mirrored her own careful attention to life, she felt that familiar flutter in her chest, that gentle ache of longing, tempered by the knowledge of boundaries, responsibility, and the need to protect both him and herself from crossing a line that could never be undone, and yet, in the quiet moments when the house was still and the world outside seemed distant, she allowed herself to simply observe him, to feel the subtle joy of his presence, the warmth of his energy, the delicate beauty of his expression, and in that moment, she realized that life, as ordinary as it appeared, had become extraordinary, charged with emotion, anticipation, and a connection that neither had sought but that had found them anyway, and she wondered what the next day would bring, how their shared glances might evolve, how the unspoken bond would develop, and whether the feelings that had begun in an accident, in a fleeting, awkward moment, would remain suppressed or slowly bloom into something deeper, something more honest, something that could perhaps one day be acknowledged without fear, judgment, or consequence, and the thought left her both excited and terrified, a perfect storm of emotion that carried her through the day, coloring every interaction, every smile, every small shared moment with the subtle intensity of hearts quietly awakening, and she knew, without needing to speak it aloud, that their lives had changed, and that from this moment forward, nothing would feel ordinary again, for the threads of longing, admiration, and unspoken understanding had been woven, delicate yet unbreakable, into the fabric of their daily lives, and both Emily and Nathan were acutely aware that this was only the beginning of a story neither could yet fully understand, a story that would unfold slowly, tenderly, and with all the complications, joys, and emotional depth that life could offer. The sky had been darkening all afternoon, low clouds rolling in like a slow warning, and Emily felt the tension in the air before the first drops of rain fell, the scent of wet earth filling the open windows and making the house feel smaller, cozier, yet charged with energy she could not name, and when Nathan appeared at the front door, soaked from the sudden downpour, she noticed the way his hair clung to his forehead, the faint tremble in his hands, and something about his vulnerability struck a chord deep within her, reminding her that beneath the awkward tension and unspoken desires that had been building between them for days, he was still a young man navigating emotions just as confusing and overwhelming as her own, and she invited him inside with a soft smile, brushing rain from his shoulders, noticing the way his eyes met hers with a mixture of gratitude and unspoken intensity, and the simple act of standing near him, sharing a towel, seemed to shrink the distance that had always existed between them, the quiet intimacy of the moment making her pulse quicken, a mixture of excitement, fear, and longing flooding her chest in a way she could not deny, and Nathan, aware of the closeness, shifted slightly. But there was no hesitation in the way he held her gaze, the rain outside creating a private world where the rules of everyday life felt suspended, and as they both stood there, the storm beating against the windows, the air thick with the smell of wet grass and the soft rhythm of water, words began to tumble out, awkward and hesitant, confessions half-formed, revealing more than either intended, yet neither could stop, and Nathan's voice cracked slightly as he tried to explain the accident of the other evening, his embarrassment mingling with something deeper, something Emily could feel without needing to name, and she reached out, resting her hand gently on his arm, a touch meant to comfort, yet it sent a shiver through them both, a reminder of the electricity that existed between them, subtle yet undeniable, and in that suspended moment, they were neither stepmother and stepson nor strangers, but two human beings standing on the edge of understanding, feeling the delicate pull of attraction tempered by awareness, and Emily spoke softly, her words trembling, "I know," acknowledging the unspoken connection, the shared tension, and Nathan's eyes flickered with relief and fear all at once, his fingers tightening briefly, almost instinctively, around the towel he still held, and the storm outside seemed to echo the storm within, a perfect mirror of the emotions neither had dared express until now, and as lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark, bright contrast, Emily realized that this moment was a turning point, a chance to acknowledge the truth of their feelings without stepping beyond the line, to recognize the bond that had formed in glances, touches, and the quiet intimacy of shared spaces, and Nathan, sensing her understanding, allowed himself to exhale, the tension leaving his shoulders in a way that felt both relieving and bittersweet, because while acknowledgement brought closeness, it also highlighted the impossibility of certain desires, the constraints of life and morality that demanded restraint, and yet the heart does not listen to reason, and as the rain intensified, pattering rhythmically against the roof, their shared silence spoke volumes, communicating what words could not, the rhythm of their breathing matching the storm outside, each heartbeat an echo of the quiet longing they both felt, and Emily's mind raced as she imagined the countless ways their connection could unfold, each scenario tempered by careful thought, by fear of consequence, yet each stirring something undeniable within her, the heat of attraction, the thrill of emotional intimacy, the bittersweet ache of unfulfilled desire, and Nathan, too, felt the same, a mirror of her own tangled emotions, his gaze softening, lingering, conveying the depth of his feelings without a single word, and she wondered at the fragility of the human heart, how a single accidental intrusion could ignite a series of emotions that neither of them could have predicted, feelings that were dangerous, thrilling, tender, and profoundly real all at once. And as they moved to sit together under the small covered porch, the rain drenching the world around them, they found themselves sharing stories, laughter, and confessions that revealed the complexities of their lives, the struggles they each carried, the loneliness and longing that had been masked by day-to-day routines, and yet, even amidst this bonding, the undercurrent of romantic tension remained, subtle, pressing, a thread that connected them invisibly, unspoken yet persistent, and Emily noticed how natural it felt to have him close, how simple gestures, a brush of the hand, a shared look, a sigh caught in the throat, held weight and meaning far beyond ordinary interactions, and Nathan, aware of the delicate line, allowed himself brief moments of closeness, leaning just slightly, speaking just slightly softer, each movement measured yet instinctive, reflecting both restraint and desire, and in those moments, Emily felt the duality of their situation, the joy of connection and the fear of crossing boundaries, intertwined in a dance as intricate and unpredictable as the storm surrounding them, and as the rain continued, she realized that this night would remain etched in her memory forever, not because of the accident or the awkwardness, but because of the raw, honest human connection it revealed, the emotions laid bare in a way that words alone could never achieve, and Nathan, sensing the gravity of the moment, shared stories from his past, confessions of fear, moments of vulnerability that Emily responded to with empathy, encouragement, and quiet admiration, the emotional intimacy deepening with every exchange, creating a bond that was tender, profound, and charged with the subtle thrill of longing, and the longer they stayed there, the more Emily understood the complexity of what they shared, a mix of affection, attraction, understanding, and respect, all coexisting in a space that felt both safe and exhilarating, and the storm outside seemed to heighten the intensity, each clap of thunder echoing the rapid beat of her heart, each flash of lightning illuminating the emotional landscape between them, showing them both the truth they had been avoiding, the undeniable depth of feeling that had grown quietly but insistently. And as the night fell fully, leaving them in darkness broken only by the occasional reflection of streetlights on wet pavement, Emily and Nathan remained close, sharing warmth, stories, and unspoken understanding, aware that this moment was fleeting, precious, and transformative, a pivotal chapter in their lives where emotions could be acknowledged, longings could be felt without acting upon them, and hearts could recognize each other in ways that would leave lasting impressions. And Emily, as she finally rose to usher Nathan inside from the rain, felt a mixture of relief, joy, and anticipation, knowing that while they had not crossed boundaries, they had crossed a threshold of understanding, and Nathan, feeling the same, offered a quiet smile, a small gesture that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, and as the door closed behind him, shutting out the storm but leaving the emotional storm inside intact, both of them realized that their connection had deepened irrevocably, that the accidental intimacy of that rainy evening had created a bond that would shape their interactions, their thoughts, and their emotions for days, weeks, and possibly years to come. And Emily, sitting by the window later that night, listening to the rain finally ease, reflected on the beauty and danger of the human heart, the fragile line between affection and desire, and the power of vulnerability to create moments that are unforgettable, knowing that Nathan had seen her, truly seen her, in a way no one else had, and that she had seen him in return, and that this mutual recognition, tender and complicated, emotional and thrilling, would remain with them both as they navigated the ordinary and extraordinary moments of life together, forever changed by one stormy evening under the porch, one shared glance, one gentle touch, and the unspoken acknowledgement that feelings existed between them, alive, persistent, and undeniable. Days passed after the rainy evening, and Emily found herself moving through the house with a new awareness, every glance, every movement, every sound carrying subtle reminders of Nathan and the tension that had quietly grown between them. And though the days seemed ordinary on the surface, beneath that ordinary rhythm was an undercurrent of emotion that refused to be ignored, a delicate mix of longing, curiosity, and unspoken connection that pulsed through their interactions like an invisible thread connecting their hearts. And one evening, as Emily returned from running errands, she noticed a small envelope slipped under her bedroom door, plain and unassuming, yet heavy with promise, and her heart quickened, a mixture of anticipation and fear gripping her as she hesitated to pick it up, knowing instinctively that the contents would reveal the emotional truth Nathan had been holding within him. And when she finally gathered the courage to open it, her eyes scanned the carefully written words, each sentence revealing more than she expected, his handwriting carrying the tremor of vulnerability, the honesty of someone struggling with complex emotions. And Emily felt a rush of warmth, understanding, and bittersweet tension as she read about his thoughts, his confusion, his admiration, and the respect he had for her, the letter showing a depth of feeling that mirrored her own, the careful way he expressed himself revealing that beneath his usual composure and politeness was a young man grappling with emotions as intense and complicated as hers. And she realized that the letter was not just an apology for the accidental intrusion or the awkward moments that followed, but a bridge between their hearts, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had grown without either fully understanding how or when. And as she held the paper in her hands, she felt tears prick at her eyes, a mix of relief, joy, and the ache of longing, emotions she had tried to contain now spilling over in quiet, private waves. And Emily, sitting on the edge of her bed, reread passages, savoring the words, the honesty, the courage it took for Nathan to lay bare his feelings, and she found herself thinking back to every subtle interaction since that night, every accidental brush of hands, every shared smile, every lingering glance, realizing that these moments had been building a tapestry of understanding, tenderness, and mutual awareness that neither had dared to name aloud. And yet now, with the letter in her hands, it all became undeniable, the emotional depth, the quiet longing, and the mutual care that had been forming in the space between them, the invisible threads of connection made visible in his words, and Emily felt a mixture of empowerment and vulnerability, the knowledge that she was seen, truly seen, in a way that touched her deeply, stirring feelings she had kept locked away for years, feelings of desire, affection, admiration, and the strange thrill of intimacy that did not require crossing boundaries but existed in its own, delicate space. And as the evening wore on, she decided to respond, taking her own pen and paper, her hand trembling slightly as she began to write, carefully choosing words that would convey her understanding, her own feelings, and her desire to navigate the complex emotions between them with honesty and care. And she wrote about the subtle joy she found in their moments together, the awareness of his presence that had become a comforting rhythm in her days, the appreciation of his thoughtfulness, and the recognition that the connection they shared, though fragile and complicated, was real, meaningful, and precious, a bond that deserved acknowledgement even if it could not yet take a traditional form. And Nathan, somewhere in the house, unaware that she was writing her reply, was likely feeling the same anticipation, the same thrill of emotional closeness, the same wonder at the sudden depth of their bond. And Emily, finishing her letter, carefully folded it, her mind racing with hope and fear, excitement and hesitation, knowing that when he read it, he would understand the truth she had kept close to her heart, the feelings that had been growing quietly, persistently, like a slow flame, warming them both, illuminating the reality that human connection, even complicated, delicate, and bound by circumstance, could be profound, life-changing, and unforgettable. And she placed the envelope where Nathan would find it, the simple act of leaving it in his space feeling monumental, charged with anticipation, respect, and the thrill of shared vulnerability. And as she watched him later that evening notice it, his eyes widening slightly, a subtle smile tugging at his lips, she felt her heart swell with a mixture of relief and joy, knowing that the unspoken, delicate, emotional bond they had been nurturing was now acknowledged, shared, and alive. And in that acknowledgement, they both experienced a quiet, thrilling sense of intimacy, not physical but emotional, a recognition of each other's hearts, the subtle power of vulnerability, and the beauty of feelings expressed with honesty and care. And as the night deepened, they sat together in different rooms, hearts beating with the knowledge that this moment, this exchange, had shifted their relationship irrevocably, creating a foundation for understanding, trust, and connection that would guide them forward. And Emily, looking out the window at the quiet night, reflected on the journey from that first accidental intrusion, to the quiet tension of everyday glances, to the shared stormy evening, and now, to this moment of lettered confessions, realizing that each step, each emotional ripple, had led them here, to a place of awareness, acknowledgement, and the subtle thrill of connection that was at once safe and exhilarating, tender and powerful. And Nathan, reading her words in his room, feeling the warmth, the care, and the emotional honesty she had conveyed, understood that they had created something extraordinary within the ordinary, a quiet love story of sorts, unfolding in shared glances, written words, and the mutual recognition of hearts reaching toward each other cautiously but persistently. And Emily, as sleep finally approached, felt a serene satisfaction, a quiet thrill, and an unspoken promise to herself that no matter what the future held, the bond they shared, fragile, intense, and beautiful, would remain, shaping the way they looked at each other, communicated, and felt, forever changed by the moments of vulnerability, honesty, and emotional courage that had begun with a single, unexpected intrusion. And in the stillness of the night, with letters exchanged and hearts acknowledged, Emily realized that true connection is rare, delicate, and transformative, and theirs, born from chance, nurtured by emotion, and acknowledged with care, was exactly that, a story of longing, understanding, and unspoken love, powerful enough to change the course of ordinary lives, leaving both her and Nathan awake with the quiet certainty that nothing would ever feel the same again, that this chapter, full of emotion, introspection, and the beauty of human connection, would remain etched in their hearts forever, a testament to the subtle, profound magic of shared vulnerability, respect, and emotional honesty. And as she finally laid down, heart full, mind racing, and soul warmed by the thought of him, Emily understood fully that this story, delicate yet enduring, had reached a new level of depth, intimacy, and emotional resonance, a conclusion to their journey thus far, yet a beginning of everything yet to come.